So in this lesson, we're going to look at the Boolean functions, but first I'm going to clear the canvas by doing a Control A to select all. I'm going to do a backspace to clear the canvas, and then I'm going to hit Control D to deselect that select all function. So now we've gotten back to a clear canvas, and now we're going to come up here and we're just going to go ahead with some of our selection tools and make some selections. So I'm just going to start here and go ahead and Alt out that and maybe add a Shift, add something like so, just to get some interesting odd shapes. Maybe switch over to something like our freehand. Go ahead, there we go, freehand, and maybe add freehand, something like so. Okay, so now we have a fairly complex selection. Now let's say that we want to work with this and we want to make sure that we're doing some sort of Boolean function. Well, a Boolean function is basically when you're basically more or less choosing how these two things are going to interact with one another. So in this instance, I've turned on alpha 1 so that we can see what's going to happen with this. Now I'm going to choose to go to Select, Save Selection, and I'm going to choose alpha 1, and we're going to do a Boolean function here. And the Boolean function that we're going to do here is to either replace the mask, add to the mask, subtract from the mask, or intersect with the mask. And actually, we're going to do all of these so that you can see what they do. So I'm just going to go ahead and instead of doing alpha 1, I'm just going to choose to save it to new. And we're going to hit OK. And that way we can always get back to this selection. It's right there. All right, so Control D to deselect that. And if we want to load that selection, you'll notice here at the bottom that we have our first icon is Load Selection. So we just click Load Selection. We don't have to be on the channel. We choose alpha 2, replace selection, and hit OK. And now the button next to that, you'll see is Save Selection as Channel. If you click this, it will give you the Save Selection dialog. And again, if we choose to save to alpha 1, now we can do a Boolean function. And we'll choose first Replace Mask and hit OK. So immediately what you see is that alpha 1 now has been completely replaced by the current selection. If we go ahead and undo that, and now we click Save Selection as Channel, and we choose alpha 1, and we choose Add to Mask and hit OK, you'll see that now that black has been added. Now notice that the soft edges that were here have not been affected, but these have hard edges. And that's because when you save a selection, it remembers whether or not you had anti-aliasing or whether you had any kind of feathering. So it knows all those things. Now if I undo that, Control Z to undo, and I again come back here and I say Save Selection and choose again alpha 1, and this time I say Subtract from Mask and hit OK. And again, now you see that that has been basically more or less cut out from the previously black areas. Now, of course, in the white areas, it will have no impact, but in the black areas, we now have hard edges along with these soft edges. And this is the way that you can get some edges where you have soft things fading out into certain directions, but at the same time, you have hard edges in other places. This can be very, very handy. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z to undo that. Finally, we're going to go to the Save Selection as Channel, alpha 1, intersect with mask. And when we choose this, what's going to happen is everything that's outside of that mask is going to be cut away. So I'm going to hit OK. And you can see now that the only parts of this that were saved that are still black are the parts that were black that were overlapped by this new selection. If I Control D to deselect that, and I choose to load this as a selection and say Replace Selection, you can now see if we come back up to RGB and turn off the visibility for alpha 1, if we fill this with something like, say, black, we're going to get exactly what we just saw in our channel. This is the reason why I like to have my alpha 1 set up this way, is because then I can see very, very clearly what it is I'm going to get when I go to fill. And that can be really nice and useful. Now you'll notice that when alpha 2 comes up, it does not come up with those options. It comes up with the old options. So if you want to change those options, you need to make sure that you also set the channel attributes to be set this way as well. And you can have all of your different channels set to different colors, set to different opacities, and set to different ways of displaying. So you can have it set up a number of different ways, whichever way makes you happy. So I'm just going to go ahead now and look at these last two options here, the invert channel and the new channel. So the invert channel, of course, we have alpha 2. So I'm going to go ahead and invert alpha 2 by clicking invert channel. And now you can see that now that rubylith color has been set here so that this part here is the masked part. So basically the idea being is that if we wanted to fill everything, we would load alpha 2 and we would go ahead and say load selection, alpha 2, replace selection. And now everything but what's inside that has been selected. So if I click out here and hit Control D, you'll see that if I turn off these two channels, that's exactly what happened. That now alpha 2 has been inverted, and because of the channel attributes here, the part that is masked is the color. So like I say, it can be confusing if you have multiple different ways of setting these up if you don't retain the knowledge of why these things are behaving differently. This channel is set up to reveal the color as the selected areas, and this channel is set up to reveal the color as the masked areas. And again, like I said, be aware that when you're setting these up, that can definitely catch you off guard if you're not paying attention. So what's this final option here? New channel. Well, basically this creates a new blank channel, and this new blank channel can be really useful. If I go ahead now and I just come back up to my RGB and turn all these channels off so that we can't see any of them, I do a Control D, Control A, and backspace to clear everything. And we come back over here to our alpha 3 and turn the visibility of that on. You can see here that this has our typical channel attributes that we get by default, which is 50% red for the masked areas. Let's say that we want to paint in a selection. Well, all we need to do is just set this for selected areas, set the color to be whatever you want it to be, but I prefer to set it to 100% opacity so that we can see what it is that we're doing when we're painting. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what will immediately happen is now we're greeted with basically what appears to be a white canvas. However, if we come in here now with a brush, any brush, it doesn't matter, I'll use this flatter from the gouache category, and I'll begin painting right in the alpha. And you can see as I'm painting in the alpha, and I can grab basically any brush I want to. So I'll grab a chalk here, and now you can see I can paint right in that alpha. And if I come back now and I say load channel as selection, and I choose alpha 3, and say replace selection, and then we can just turn the visibility of alpha 3 off, you can see that now on our canvas, we can go in here and we can paint with any color we want to. So let's say that I want to come over to colors, pick a color that I like, use the chalk, and now I want to just begin to just paint right in there like so. And I hit Control D, and you can see now that we can do all kinds of painterly effects and make them selections, which we can then load and paint through.